welcome to Planning for Success, Building or Defending a Proposal with Evidence in Mind. Lesson 2, Identifying Your Needs. This is the second lesson in the Planning for Success series. In Lesson 1, we considered the question, how do we select an approach or initiative that is likely to help? In order to address this question, you must have a clear understanding of your problem, i.e., what need you're attempting to address. Consider the problem as the difference between what you want and the way things are actually happening. You may recall that the first step in the monitoring process is to reflect on your needs. As you study your data, needs emerge. Conducting a needs assessment is a necessary first step in identifying the problem. Determining the cause or uncovering why a problem is occurring is essential to selecting a strategy or strategies that will address your problem. Reflecting on the data used to establish your need or problem should lead you to not only determining the desired outcomes, but identification of some key baseline data. To help you determine the need and to clarify your problem, by the end of this lesson you will have knowledge of techniques for determining your needs and root causes, as well as knowledge of tools for developing and clarifying your problem statement. We need to be cautious that we do not move too quickly into finding solutions before we have a clear understanding of our need and its root causes. When we skip the investigation of our data, we risk misidentification of our problem. For example, if we found out that we had an increase in dropouts, and we determined that it was due to poor study skills of our high school students, and we put in a program to handle that, we run the risk of misidentification of the real problem, which if we had discovered the root causes might have been poor literacy skills. What would you do if you went to the doctor and he or she started treatment prior to running any tests or asking you any health-related questions? To avoid acting prior to determining your need and the root causes of your problem, we need to back up and make sure that we begin with the need in mind. Okay, let's examine your need. In order to help determine your need, you need to start with a question. This question could come from your data review or other evidence of your problem. Then we need to investigate to determine your root cause. Consider this example. If we have a large number of students in Common Core Math 1 who are receiving Fs, we could begin with the question, how do we ensure that these students pass both the course as well as the associated EOC or EOG examination? When determining the root causes of your problem, it is helpful to begin with a question. But how do we know if the question you're considering is at the root of your problem? You may be familiar with the 5 whys, a technique for starting with a question and continually asking the question, why, until you have determined the root cause. This technique is described in the Monitoring the Success of Your Efforts series and is helpful in determining short, intermediate, and long-term goals. Another way to determine root causes is by using the question formation technique to focus on your true question. This technique is described in the DataWise book and originates from the Right Question Project. So more information can be obtained from www.rightquestion.org. Now, by brainstorming questions associated with your issue through a process of prioritizing and refocusing, you can determine what questions you want to really investigate. So if we begin with a question such as, at what grade level are students taking Common Core Math 1? We may brainstorm an additional question, what are the school differences in the percentage of students receiving Fs? We could continue down until we have a set of questions that are at the root of our problem. So this is what the question formation technique entails. What you want to do is, working with your team, begin by brainstorming questions relevant to your problem. All responses should be phrased as questions rather than statements, and avoid rewriting your questions. Leave them just as posed. And questions can be written either as closed-ended, requiring just a one-word response, or open-ended, requiring a more elaborate response. Next, what you want to do is prioritize your questions by selecting 3 questions and placing them at the top of a new sheet of paper. Your team will then brainstorm additional questions associated with these prioritized questions, and remember to follow the same procedures as before, phrasing your unedited responses as questions. Once again, You will prioritize your questions by selecting 3 questions from your newly generated set of questions. This process helps not only keep your team from jumping to solutions, but it allows many voices to be heard and allows time for deep consideration as you focus in on your issue. Now, when you tackle a problem, there are questions that need to be considered that will help establish exactly what your need and your problem you're trying to solve are. In addition to the questions such as what is your problem and why is it important, there are other questions that need to be addressed, such as what is the expected outcome, who is the intended audience, what is the level of rigor and detail required, and what constraints your solution set. There are ways of determining the answers to your questions. One method is to use graphic organizers to help break down the problem and focus your efforts. Within the Planning for Success course, you will be exposed to the bone diagram, as well as a problem-solving template and logic tree, while tools such as the logic model or plan of action and a monitoring plan will be shared in the Monitoring the Success of Your Efforts series. The bone diagram is one tool that you're most likely familiar with. This quality tool enables you to depict your current situation, i.e. your problem, as well as your future direction. It also gives you a place to capture your resistors, things that may impede your implementation, and drivers, things that will help your implementation of your strategy. The problem statement template allows you to write your questions that you just generated in terms of a problem statement. This problem statement template will help you capture the basic issue. Now, this basic issue should be written as specific as possible. You'll want to include numbers and percentages from your data that you use to uncover your need. The template also provides a place for you to capture things such as your contacts, key decision makers, the criteria and constraints for your answer, as well as the scope of your project and the likely impact or import of a successful project, i.e. your goals. A completed example of the problem-solving template is available on the Resources tab for this course. When defining a problem, watch out for problems defined too narrowly or broadly, problems that are not trackable or vague, or unrealistic in scope, or on the flip side, watch out for problems that may be trivial, in which finding the solution would not be of importance. And finally, look out for proposed solutions that are not feasible to non-movable constraints, such as board policy. In Lesson 3, you'll learn some tools for helping select an approach that is likely to be successful. Thank you.